everyone. It is 11 a.m., a little bit after 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for joining us. I have Bo with us today, and Bo knows football. He played professionally in arena football for a number of years, and also the host and founder of the Coast to Coast Sports on Roku TV. And he knows his stuff, as does Rudy Reyes, most famous for Southern California iHeart radio newscasting, and has been in the media industry for quite some time. And knows some guy named Ron Jaworski who happens to be pretty popular here in the Princeton, New Jersey and Philadelphia area. So I had to throw that in there, Rudy, as a segue into the Eagles on Monday night. I mean, what in the hell was that? I actually couldn't believe it, even though it made me very happy because my clients were on the Falcons. And I have to admit, going down the stretch, watching it in the fourth quarter there, the last couple of minutes, I thought, well, this one's probably not going to work out, but wait a minute, there is a window here. You know, if they get the first down, that's going to run the clock out. They have no reason to try to score. The line was 6.5. If they kick a field goal, I'm winning by 6. And I thought, wow, this is really going to happen. They're going to run the ball twice with Barkley. And even if he doesn't make it, they do have the option of running again. There would be, I think I estimated 38 seconds on the clock if they turned the ball over with a 3-point lead. 97 yards to go or so. Certainly more than 90, right? With 40 seconds and no timeouts. Not going to score. You're not going to get in field goal range probably more than 20% of the time. And then it was hike. And Barkley goes into the flat. And I literally, I was getting pretty sleepy then, but that really stunned me to the point that I just was like, oh my God, what is going on? And then he dropped it. Now, whether he makes the first down or not is kind of irrelevant at that point. He might have even scored a touchdown, who knows? But why in the world, when you know the other team has no timeouts? It reminded me of the Super Bowl, actually, with the Patriots and the Falcons, where the Falcons, blew that 28-3 lead. Julio Jones makes that remarkable catch on the sidelines. They have the best kicker in the game. And you think, all right, well, they're going to win the Super Bowl. And then they did a jet sweep, holding call, and all of a sudden they're punting from the 50-yard line instead of kicking a field goal that would have put them up 11. And you can tell I'm getting a little upset with these calls. But what upsets me the most, guys, is that, I tune into the Philly media sometimes just to get the sentiment, which is unbelievably negative right now. And kind of makes me a little bullish on the Eagles come this Sunday to bounce back. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But, they're bashing Barkley as the loser of the game. That's like bashing Bill Buckner as the loser of that World Series game because he was the most recent error of that inning that had 2 errors before he made the cataclysmic one. So the game was lost way before that. And I'll end my little rant here with this. I'm an analytics guy, and not bragging. I've taken some courses at MIT. I kind of know my stuff. There is not one analytic worth its weight in anything, even horse manure, that tells you to go for it on 4th and 4 in a low-scoring game. If it's the SEC and you have Alabama and Georgia and the defenses can't stop each other, that's a bad example because they have great defenses. But you get my point. And then you would go for it because a field goal actually puts you further behind, so to speak. You got to be scoring touchdowns to stay in pace with the other team. It was 3-0 at that point, I think, right? Or it was 0-0.
It was 0-0.
So, I mean, and then there's another stat. That's a great point. NFL team that scores first has a pretty good chance of winning the game from that point on, unless they're a double-digit dog, which doesn't really happen in the NFL. But I thought that was ridiculous. They should have scored first, taken the lead, but they didn't. And I think that's deflating for an athlete. And I'll pass this over to you, Bo, since you played the game. How would you feel on that 4th and 4 and you don't get it? Is it deflating?
It's early enough in the game. No. That's one of those where if you make it, you look like a genius. And if you don't, you look dumb for doing it. But it's early enough in the game. It's a tie game. That one I wasn't that mad about. It was all of a sudden we're going to shift into prevent defense that prevents you from winning games. And as a defensive player, it makes me mad as a fan or as a player. Watching it makes me mad. Being on the field for it makes me mad. Like, use the defense that's won you the game all day. If they happen to beat you over the top, hey, kudos to them because it's the only time they did it. But if you're going to give a guy like Kirk Cousins a bunch of rhythm, just letting him walk down the field, that last missed catch didn't matter, right? I mean,
Agreed.
so it's it doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course, everybody crucifying Barkley for dropping that ball really also doesn't make sense. We've seen tons of guys start to look upfield and miss an easy catch because he's looking for the contact, right? Like he's wanting to pick up that first down. So that ball's almost there. He starts to peek upfield to see if he can get there. It's not the most unheard of thing. And as a play call, I mean, it's not the worst play call. That's a catch 95% of the time, right? So, I mean, it's not like it was you were throwing it to the boundary of the end zone. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the safest throws and catches you can have. So would it have made more sense to run the ball? Sure. Do I understand the play call? And I mean, honestly, he was wide open, right? Like if he wanted to score, he could have, or he could have just dove down after the marker and the game's over anyway. But blaming him for losing the game is the most ludicrous thing because they still had to walk down the field and you let them.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing too. There's no pass pressure, no defensive pressure really the whole game. And I'll turn this to you, Rudy. Now, in the first drive, Saquon Barkley got no touches coming off a 3-touchdown game. And even then, I'll be honest, I was at my bowling league and the guys asked me questions. You're like, what do you think? Well, I don't think this is too good when you have athletes as good as the Eagles have. Why don't you have an offensive game plan to, what we're going to do? We have the studs. Try to stop us. And if you do, we'll tip our hat to you, and that's it. I mean, why didn't they go with their best? It seemed like they were overthinking it again, trying to use Barkley as a decoy, which is mind-blowing in my opinion. But what were your takeaways, Rudy, from the game on Monday?
Well, in all fairness, and to all fairness of the fans that were actually in attendance there, and shamefully, I must say this, that it's all about situational football. They weren't calling it all game long. There were a lot of missed calls they could have made, a tight end, bunch formation on the right-hand side, maybe blocking up for Saquon to gain a little bit more after the run. There was just some very questionable play calling, especially on offense when they were marching down the field to essentially cap the game and call it a day and get out of there with a W. I don't know what that was from Jalen Hurts. I don't think anybody knows what that was, but he clearly did not throw the ball accurately or at least on time to get it to the wide receiver. Instead, here comes a Falcons defender swooping in for that INT, and all of a sudden, that's your game. That's it. End of story. You can't give a guy like Kirk Cousins, who reminds me of a poor man's Phillip Rivers or, last year's Derek Carr, right? And now, obviously, Philadelphia is going into a very difficult play against the aforementioned Derek Carr, the New Orleans Saints, who just put a shellacking on Dallas. That's an uphill battle all in itself. But when it comes to that game, you have to work with what has been working, and they did not work with what they were working with. And to your point, working with all the studs and the guys who were designed to be in their right positions to make this basically a no-win. The O-line did its job for the most part, despite a rookie center. I mean, even Jason Kelce said himself that he's got, a little bit of moxie, but he needs game time. He needs reps, right? We kind of questioned that with Aaron Rodgers last night as they put a beating, and I hate to say that calmly, but they put a beating on a team that they have historically lost against in New England. Which is their first win in, I think, 6 seasons or six games. I mean, it's just atrocious. Jalen Hurts was not at his best, but the O-line was playing decently enough and creating those gaps for Saquon Barkley to run up through. I just don't know why you deviate from what was working. And we see this all the time in the NFL. We've seen it in Super Bowls. You mentioned the Falcons-Patriots game. That was an absolute debacle by Atlanta. I mean, we're talking about decks folding. We're walking off the plank with your eyes closed. It was just absolutely horrible. So are the Eagles going to learn from this? Well, they better learn fast because their game right around the corner against a very formidable New Orleans Saints team is on the rise, and it's going to be a tough one.
Well, let's go right into that game. For the Eagle fans out there, I guess we have to offer a little bit of hope in this game. I'll try my best, and there is not too much good news right now for the Eagles. Last in the NFL, ranked 32nd, allowing a whopping 6.4 yards per rush, which my takeaway from that, guys, is that if you cannot stop the run in the NFL, you're not going to win many games. You're not going to be even a 500 team. So the question is, they had no pressure. Jalen Carter was largely invisible in the previous game. And whether they can turn that around in a week, I just don't know. One thing I can tell you,
they're missing Hassan Reddick. I'll tell you that right now. He's going to never let that guy walk, and now he's sitting on the sidelines for New York, wondering, is he going to play? And you know what? They just don't need it.
That's true. They don't.
Up in the run.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. So in the Circa Millions that I've done now for, I guess, the 5th year, and the Circa Survivor, we all get the news items on that. One thing I do use now, and I encourage people to do this too, before the season starts, there's a betting line for every single game of all 18 weeks. Now, granted, when you get in the 18th week, there's some games that don't have a line because you don't know if those teams are going to be playing their starters or, resting for the playoffs. But at least for the first 10 weeks, you have a benchmark then of what we as a betting community think these teams are. So before the season started, the Eagles were a 3.5-point road favorite in New Orleans for this game. Given the performance of the Saints, which has been stellar, and the not so good performance of the Eagles, the now Saints find themselves a 3.5-point favorite, and that's a swing of 7 points. Whenever there's been a swing of 6 or more points from your benchmark to the current game, is an opportunity to bet on the team that got cheaper, which in this case is the Eagles. And it hits about 65% of the time. And I use this as the Circa Millions goes on. It comes in handy during those bye weeks where you have slim pickings. You might like 2 games a lot, and then you still have to pick 3 from really difficult matchups that can be coin flips. So this has helped greatly in getting into the top levels. Also in the Circa, once again, we had carnage, absolute carnage in the first 2 weeks. And I think this applies to all eliminator contests. And this is a key little thing to be aware of too. Week 1, the Bengals had 3,400 entries were on the Bengals out of 12,800. Each entry is $1,000. Wiped out. Week 2, we had the Raiders, who I actually gave out to my clients, and I actually was on a show on Saturday. I got to tell you this story. It sounds like I'm kind of bragging, but the point is going to be you never say never. So we were talking about the game, and I said, guys, I just think this game's going to be a lot closer than everybody thinks. The Ravens are a great team. They could be looking ahead to the Dallas game. And look what happened. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders actually win the game, and I actually said it on the air. The guest that was with me, with all due respect, very good guy, very intelligent, great bettor. He said, John, there is no way the Ravens are going to lose to the Raiders. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. But I'm just saying this is going to be a much closer game than you think. And lo and behold, the Ravens lose the game. And that was another 2,800 entries down the toilet. There was about 800 on the Eagles. They lost. And there was a couple others that I can't remember. So now we're down to 3,200 entries in 2 weeks. So it marks the greatest carnage in the history of that contest. And I'm sure even in the local eliminators that we're in, you're seeing the same thing. So predicting who's going to be the number 1 pick, the most popular, is pretty important. If you can do that and determine who it's going to be, you have a pretty good chance then not to bet that team because it's way too obvious, and you move on to another game. But anyway, digressed there a little bit, but in this game with the Eagles, I think the best thing for them is getting away from the fan base and away from the Philly media, playing on the road. They can at least have clear heads when they get into the game. I do have this little betting system, and then you can tear it apart or agree with it. it does support the Eagles. And believe me, I don't know if it's going to be a premium bet or not because they can't stop the run. Numbers are numbers, but fundamentals have to support the numbers. And if they don't, then it's not a bet. But this algorithm has done pretty well over the course of time. You're going to bet on road teams priced between the threes, which means a 3-point favorite, a 3-point underdog. The host is coming off an upset win by 21 or more points. 32-20 straight up would be the Eagles, and 30-20 for 60% winners. If the team is coming off an upset home loss, they bounce back to a 5-2 record, 5-2 against the spread. My question to you guys is, I'm scared to death that this is going to be 5-3 after Sunday, and the Eagles go to 1-2. Bo, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I actually like the Eagles here. Now, some of that is because I just don't buy that the Saints are what we're seeing, right? Tearing off 40 burgers against everybody. That just doesn't feel right, especially after you look at last season where they wildly underperformed. And that team is mostly the same team from last year. So were the first two games impressive? Absolutely. Do I think they sustain that moving forward? Not really. And of course, you got the Eagles that are going to be mad after last week. So I'm going to go with the Eagles on the road here. I have them winning outright.
My gut says that that's what's going to happen, and it's going to make the media look pretty bad in Philly. I'll give you one little story here, Rudy, before I hear what your thoughts are. I forget what season this was. I'm going to say 2017. And the Eagles got stumbled out of the gate. And the whole coaching staff was to be fired. They were losers. The quarterback, I think it was Jalen Hurts' first year starter, come to think of it. He can't throw the long ball. He has no arm. They can't run the ball. They can't do anything. They should be playing a different sport maybe where their talents reside. So they were playing Detroit in Detroit when Detroit was bad, arguably one of the worst teams in the league at this time. And the Eagles were 2.5-point favorites. And of course, why in the world are they favored? There's no chance. They're going to lose to the worst team in the league, Long story short, final score was 42-6, Eagles. So New York Giants, New York Jets, Philadelphia, the sentiment of the media is actually a handicapping tool for me to be contrarian, because at these times where the world's coming to an end, or we're going to win the Super Bowl, or we're going to win the World Series, it's a red flag. And, these guys are intelligent. I'm not saying they're dumb, but when everybody's facing the same way, I learned this on Wall Street, you now have a bull market in the stocks, the Fed lowered rates, and it's your rational exuberance, just buy. And that's when the tops happen, when everybody is bullish, nobody is fearing a correction. So that's the analogy I have for the Eagles, that we're buying the Eagles pretty darn cheap and we're selling the Saints at a pretty high price. Do you agree with that, Rudy?
I'm going to have to be a buyer of a team that has shown consistency, right? We see the Eagles, they're consistently inconsistent. And I hate to use that term, but it's actually true and it's accurate. Why? They can't stop the run. As I mentioned, they missed this on Reddick. Thirdly, it's a scheme. The scheme does not warrant. They're going to have to change it up against New Orleans, but that scheme does not warrant being able to stop the run at the line, or at least clogging the lanes and closing the gaps. And they're just not doing it. I understand you have to have lane integrity. Well, there is no lane integrity. People are getting through quickly. I can't say that I'm all in on Philadelphia right now, because I'm not. If I was to choose them to cover, I would choose them to cover, but I'm taking New Orleans. Why? Because their scheme has been matching exactly what people had expected, not only from the offensive format, but from Derek Carr, who is historically known to make very poor decisions. But with the new offensive coordinator, with Mickey Loomis working his magic in the offseason, it kind of spells. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm all in on New Orleans, because we know that New Orleans has shown the ugly side of NOLA, right? There's a nice part, and then there's not such a nice part, and they're kind of showing the nice part right now, but the ugly side will rear its head. But I'm going to take the Saints. The Eagles just, I want to see what they look like on the road. There's still plenty of football left to be played. This isn't an overreaction. This is just a statement saying that, look, this is where we're at. I don't think Philadelphia has enough to put away these Saints. They have way too many weapons. Alvin Kamara is making himself known. You still have that dual threat quarterback for New Orleans. Derek Carr's been playing complete opposite of what I thought and who I thought. And considering he's from the Central Valley here in California, where I report from at Fox 26, it just makes me believe that maybe he's turned a corner. New face, different place, right? Last year he wasn't very good, and I'm probably putting that very mildly. But when it comes to what he's done so far this year, I mean, he's been dropping dimes. I mean, he's been making corners pay, would-be QB spies, making them regret their positioning. And, he's just been able to do what we had expected from him coming out of Fresno State many years ago. So I'm in on New Orleans. I'm taking New Orleans as the home pick, even though obviously I'm not in New Orleans, but I'm going to pick them at least by a touchdown over Philadelphia, who ends up making some things right that were once wrong, and we've seen that wrong against the Atlanta Falcons.
One question, yes or no, for you guys. We'll move on to the Dallas Ravens game. If Sirianni is under 500 at week 9, is he still coaching the Eagles?
No. I don't see it.
It depends on how he's there, right? Like if he's getting blown out of games, or if he has a lot of situational football issues, then yeah, he's probably gone. If it's just some things didn't fall his way, I think he might be all right. Still a hot seat, obviously. But if these losses are because he's just making bad decisions, yeah, it's entirely possible.
Interesting. Moving on to the Ravens, who are a shocking 0-2. But I think, Rudy, you were on the show when I said I took Pittsburgh to win the division. And I'll admit, I laughed because I still don't think they're going to win the division, although it was a tremendous value at 28-1. It is no one in their right mind would honestly say Pittsburgh's going to be 2-0 and the Ravens 0-2. I'll admit the Raiders game, when they won, I couldn't even believe it myself. But you get these shockers in the NFL. You get it in college football too. So with this game, somebody's going to be 1-2 and somebody is going to be possibly 0-3. So this is a very critical game, I think, for both of them, because when you're 0-2, only 11.9% of teams make the playoffs, as you guys know. But of those 11.9%, most of them, the large majority of them, were playoff teams in the previous season. So there still is hope for the Ravens. Even if they would lose this game on the road to Dallas, they have the talent to right the ship and get things together. The total, I think, is pretty darn high for this game, which makes me think that Harbaugh is going to open up the offense and really give it to Dallas after what we saw the Saints do. The Saints are averaging a league best 8.4 yards per point, meaning that every 8.4 yards, they're putting a point on the scoreboard. That's not sustainable. That's just not, no team in NFL history has even posted one under 10.5. But even a regression, the Saints can still regress and play at a very, very high level on offense. And then the defense of the Dallas Cowboys, I think, is worse. And I have said, with all due respect to Dallas Cowboy fans, you're an average team. You're no longer America's team, and you're an average team at best. Okay, and that's my honest take on it. I actually think the Ravens are going to go to Dallas and really put another consecutive home losses on the Cowboys. Let's start with Rudy and see what he thinks of this, and any comments you have about those great Pittsburgh Steelers, because I know that is your favorite team.
Well, Ashley, I'll be honest with you. I did not expect Baltimore to go down like this, at least in the early setting heading into week 3. And, we've seen what happened historically last night when the New York Jets took out the Patriots. I was nearly coughing up my lunch or dinner at that point in the day. I have a lot of questions surrounding this Baltimore Ravens defense, which have been relatively playing on a high, but then at 0-2, I mean, how defeating is that, especially when you're looking, you haven't even played any AFC North Division games yet. So put that in the sidebar, in the rearview mirror, if you will, only because they're closer than they appear, and they're going to rear their ugly heads against Cleveland, who hasn't been very good. You're going to face the Steelers, who are currently 2-0 at a home opener at Acrisure Stadium against a very formidable Chargers team with J.K. Dobbins, who was once a Baltimore Raven. That's going to be interesting. Can the Steelers stop the run consistently? Well, you'll have to ask T.J. Watt that question. Was one of the co-sack leader, I believe, in the early going here in the 2024 season. So when it comes to the Steelers being 2-0, I didn't expect it, but it's a welcoming component above it all. And I say that because there was a question as to whether or not Wilson was going to start or Fields was going to start. Look, my thought is, and I'm still going to hold true to this, doesn't matter who starts. I just want them to get the job done. And so far, Justin Fields, he threw his first touchdown of the season. There was nothing but, 7 field goals, I think it was, or from one specific kicker. But Boswell's been doing absolutely nothing great, short of making every single kick count and putting points on the board for that. So, Steelers against the Chargers, that's going to be a tough game at home. It wasn't tough when they played in San Diego back in 2018 when I first started out in broadcast. But I think the Steelers at a home opener is going to be super pumped up. I think they're going to be ready for this LA Charger team to really kind of find its way. And if they allow the run to continue, they've been actually pretty stingy by all 32 team accounts in the NFL for being able to stop the run. So I'm going to take the Steelers in this one. It's not going to be nowhere near a 7-point game. Could be a 3-point with a Boswell winner. I just don't see this as being a high-scoring game. It doesn't matter who plays under center. But one thing that I will note, and I'll send this over to Bo, in regards to scrambling outside of the pocket when the pocket is folding on you like a deck of cards, Justin Fields knows what to do. He did that in Chicago to save his life, and he's doing it now in Pittsburgh as they're learning every single game and on their way. So one thing that Justin Herbert doesn't have to worry about is because he's a pocket passer, and he doesn't have to worry about the protection because he has that up front. Now, the injuries that he's facing, yes, he's on the injury list right now, but that could change, obviously, between now and Sunday.
Good stuff, Rudy. Let's take it over to Bo and see what he thinks of any comments about the Steelers and also the Ravens-Cowboys game. I've already said that I think the Ravens are they're now 9-1 against non-conference foes on the money line. I think the bet is the money line because it's very close to pick them to begin with, and I wouldn't play around with a point because it could be a 21-20 game. The Ravens win, and you don't cover. So, Bo, do you think they go to 10-1 versus non-conference?
I do. The Ravens starting 0-2 is definitely the most surprising 0-2 team of the season so far, and a lot of it has to do with, I don't know what it is about this coaching staff, but they really just don't want to use their running backs. And we watched that in postseason play last year. They had six called plays to a running back. Week 1, they ran Derrick Henry 13 times. Last week, 18 times. I mean, you have this guy. I don't know why you're not using him. That's why you brought him in, right? So that being said, the Cowboys, we all knew was going to take a step back. They had cap issues. They had to let some guys go. They have depth issues. So this is another loss at home for the Cowboys. And then on the other end, the Steelers at 2-0 is a surprise. We'll put it that way. But this is where they lose because unfortunately for them, all they have is defense. And even though that wins you some games, we watched it last year. They get into the playoffs because their defense showed out, because obviously the trio of quarterbacks that they had last year were not getting it done. Their best option was Trubisky. That doesn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence. So now you look at this year, you have Justin Fields. And if you look at his stat line, if you look at it as just numbers of roughly 280 and a touchdown, no interceptions, that sounds good, except that's over 2 games. Right. So that's not going to win you a lot of games if you're putting up less than 150 yards a game. It just doesn't make any sense. So this is one where the Steelers lose this game.
Okay. We're 1-1. I just love Tomlin and think the world of him. I think he should be up there in the top coaches of all time, to be honest with you. It's how I feel. He has never had a losing season. He's had rosters that a lot of other coaches would have gone, 3 or 4 wins, and he's managed last year to pull out another winning record. And you just can't underestimate that. He should be up there with Belichick and the Landrys and the Lombardis. I'll go that far back. So I'm sure people would disagree with that because he hasn't won too many championships. But sometimes it's not all based on that. Sometimes coaches of the year deserve to have coach of the year honors without winning the conference. Having a much better, like exceeding your expected wins total in the betting market by, say, 5 games. That's a successful season under anybody's standards. But anyway, the Ravens game, I think, I think the Cowboys are in trouble. I think they're being exposed. Again, they didn't stop anything last week. However, before we get into this, Bo, there is a system that favors the Cowboys here. It's at 71%, and it's betting on a home team coming off a home loss where they allowed more than 31 points. We thought that the Eagles can bounce back possibly. I just don't see this Cowboys team in sync whatsoever on either side of the ball. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the defense is what worries me here. We didn't see any notable growth when it comes to that defense. And, the Eagles can score, right? So, I mean, the Cowboys aren't exactly set up to be in track meets. So if it comes down to that, especially if they can get Saquon rolling, it's going to be a tough Dallas.
Yep.
Or sorry, not Dallas. I forgot where we were. My bad.
Baltimore. Baltimore.
Derrick Henry. I was just like, oh man, why did I say Saquon?
Well, you know what? I'll be honest with you.
You meant.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry hasn't been very effective for them. And I don't say that because he's not effective. I'm saying they're not utilizing him efficiently enough. I mean, you can't rely on Lamar Jackson to continually run 48 to 100 yards. I mean, he was the leading quarterback in rushing yards, in week 1. And you just can't have that. You have to put a shelf life on some of these guys, and he certainly provides a shelf life, but only if he's healthy to do so. You can't keep him running out of the pocket and being that guy. You just can't. It hit's a hit. One hit could take him out, hurt his shoulder, his elbow, his wrist, his hand, his throwing finger. It's like a compound fracture, right? You just can't have that. Baltimore has been historically good defensively, but history has a way of rewriting itself. And even though they're going to be on the road and they're going to take on an identity-less team minus Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator there in Dallas, certainly allows for some people to speculate whether or not this Dallas Cowboys team is any good without Dan Quinn. And one thing I know about Mike Zimmer, and based on people that I've spoken to, Mike Zimmer is a guy who says, get it done my way or the highway. There's no flexibility. He's not a player's coach by any means. And that's where Dan Quinn is. And that's a component as to why the Dallas Cowboys team was so great last year. They do have some injuries. They do have Deron Bland, who's out right now. You have CeeDee Lamb, who showed up on the injury list just the other day. So, there are some questions on both sides of the ball. But the biggest question I have for the Dallas Cowboys is, can they stop the run? They can't stop the run. Expect a heavy dose of Derrick Henry early and often, especially when you're talking about scoring opportunities deep in the red zone.
Well, that's the thing that hasn't made sense about this Ravens team so far with Derrick Henry is the lack of touches, because Henry is one of those guys that needs a lot of touches. He gets better as the game goes on, right? He's not an Adrian Peterson where he's just going to tear it off every time he touches the ball. His first 10 carries aren't generally awesome for Derrick Henry, right? Like, he has to wear that defense down. And because he's fast and big, right, the longer he's in there, the more plays he gets, the harder it is for that defense to continue to bring that guy down. So the fact that they're using him less than 20 times a game makes absolutely no sense.
No, and then why even bring him in there? May as well leave him in Tennessee or allow a team who needs a big-bodied, fast running back. I mean, heck, he's not even the typical size of a running back. He's like 6'1". I mean, the guy's just an absolute beast. We expect those guys to be like tight ends in college football, right? Or maybe some teams in the NFL. We look at Cordero Patterson, who plays for the Steelers. You know, the guy's just an absolute monster beast big, right? So I don't know that Baltimore's going to be able to get it done unless they change the scheme and allow Derrick Henry to take that load. As you said, he's better as the day goes on, as the game goes on. The wear and tear on him just seems to suit him better, and he works better. It's not like an engine you haven't broken in yet. Break it in, and he's going to show you the results.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Rudy. The schedule makers weren't too kind to the Ravens to begin with. They started with the Chiefs, and they were a toenail away from sending that game into overtime. So they're not playing horribly bad like some of the teams we've already talked about. Raiders, they should have won. They were 9-point favorites, but they are favorites in every single game the rest of the way, except for the time that they're on the road at the Browns. And that's a pick 'em right now, and that is in week 8.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that because they have Buffalo they have to play.
That's
Tampa
next.
Bay could be a potential loss.
0-4.
0-4. You're playing against now they're going to go back to LA. They're going to be on the road playing against the Chargers. That could be a tough dub right there. And then Philadelphia, depending on how they're playing on December 1st, that could really kind of set them back or propel them forward. But yeah, there are some wins within this. There's no doubt about it. I think a dub against Cincinnati, who's absolutely playing horrible ball. Washington, and of course, the aforementioned Dallas Cowboys. So there are some wins on the horizon. It's just if they could just get it together.
There's one game that stands out. Week 15, Ravens on the road at the Giants, and they're only 6.5 point or 6-point favorites right now. 6.5.
That's going to change.
I think that's potentially going to be 9 by the time we get to. That's one that I would put pizza money on now and see what happens 3 months from now.
Throw some anchovies on that puppy. You see what you really get by then.
Yeah. Let's quickly look at one more game, and then we'll do our roundtable best bets, and we'll head out here. Anybody in the chat room, if you want a game broken down after the show's over, I have the analytics and for every game, and I can send those over to you. Also, if you want my free picks or my premium picks for free, just send me a message on the X at John Ryan Sports, the number 1. The last game we have here is the Detroit Lions going up against Arizona. Both teams 1-1. Arizona looks like a completely different team now that they have a quarterback under center. I mean, they did play with a quarterback last year, but it seemed like at times they weren't. But seriously, that was just a bad year when they lost Murray. But Murray looks like he's back. Like there's no hesitancy in his reads, and his progressions are good. And he extends plays like we were talking about earlier of some other quarterbacks, like Derek Carr, for example. Even though he's not fast by any stretch of the imagination, he is able to extend it by even half a second. And in the NFL, you do that, and you have an arm like Derek Carr, you're going to be successful. But anyway, I think Detroit here is probably the bet. The line opened at 4. It's now down to 3. Recency bias again. Sentiment. What did the Cardinals do so far this year? It's really good, right? Detroit really hasn't impressed anybody, and they're supposed to be good. So this is where you get these line movements that people are betting the dog, which is somewhat rare in the NFL and oftentimes wrong. Not always wrong, but it's more wrong than right. So let's start with Rudy here and break down this game for us and who you like to come away with the win and end up 2-1, which is pretty critical.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that there's been some type of connection now between Marvin Harrison Jr. And Kyler Murray. Everybody remembers the debacle with Kyler Murray scrubbing the social media off of his X page and Instagram and everything else under the sun, and because they weren't giving him that contract. Did it warrant him getting that contract then? No. I would say probably more so now than any other time before. Why? Because he seems to know where Marvin Harrison Jr. is, because he's wearing the same uniform. We've seen it in game 1. It didn't quite happen as well and as often as frequent as we would have liked. But I can tell you this right now. I'm kind of in fear of the Giants, the Lions right now, only because I look at the Lions and think to myself, they should be 2-0. They should be headed into a 3-0 skid against the Cardinals. But you see what happened last week against the Rams, who are just battling injury after injury after injury. Offensive line, Cooper Kupp. I mean, there's a laundry list of things wrong with the LA Rams right now. And it all starts with the word injury. But I think that when you look at the Lions and Jared Goff and Amon St. Ra, I just think that when you look at this game, it tells me that the Cardinals are going to be the favorites in this game. And I've never thought I'd say that, to be honest with you, but I look at Arizona, I think to myself, man, this could be something, a Murray to Harrison Jr. connection as the season goes on. We've seen these types of connections before in the National Football League. I hate to say this is a copycat connection, but this is certainly a good one. And now the dividends are starting to pay off as to why they moved up so high to get Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think I've got to take the Cardinals in this one, but it's not going to be a quarterback shootout. This is going to be at least a 2-touchdown lead by Arizona to get the win.
We all know that Arizona is coming off that huge win, 41-10 over, as you said, an injury-riddled team called the Rams. And that's unfortunate that they're that banged up. Like the Patriots are banged up on the offensive line pretty badly too. But looking at ahead in the schedule here, the Cardinals actually have a path to the playoffs. And a lot of people would say, oh my God, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But hear me out here. From week 9, they play the Bears. They're 1-point dogs. Then the Jets, 2.5-point home dogs. On the road at Seattle, 3-point dog. On the road at the Vikings, a 2-point dog. Back home against the Seahawks, 1-point favorite. Playing the Patriots at home, -4. Panthers are on the schedule, -1 on the road at the Panthers. I think that should be about 6. And then no lines on the last 2 games of the week. But I could see them ripping off like 4 out of 5 wins there potentially. And if they just manage to stay at 500 through this little gauntlet of theirs, Lions, and then they have Commanders, they should take care of that. They probably do lose to the 49ers. They're 9.5-point underdogs. And they might lose to the Packers. But then they have a chance to bounce back with the Chargers. And, if they can stay at 500, that second half of the season looks pretty favorable. But in this game, Bo, who's the winner of the game? And is it going to be by a lot, or is this going to be one of those crunch times where you're sweating it out against the spread?
Yeah, well, the Lions are a 3-point favorite here. I'm still going to take the Lions to cover. I do like the Lions to kind of right the ship here. And that was sort of a bigger emotional win. And if we've watched anything through the course of the NFL, anytime you have one of those, there's usually a significant letdown the next week. So I do like that Kyler to Harrison connection. It looked a lot better last week. Obviously, the first week it didn't really work out. But, Kyler comes out and says something kind of ridiculous, saying that it wasn't his job to find Harrison, which is it's exactly his job. So so that was kind of funny. But I think their connection gets better. That being said, I think the Lions are just enough better of a team overall that they'll be able to get this job done. The line at 3 is probably right, though. Like, I would be betting the line, right?
Yep, I agree. I think we're unanimous there with Detroit, right? Rudy, you were Arizona, right?
He had the Cards winning big.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a 2-touchdown lead. Now, the only way that can be minimized is if the Lions step up and crowd the line and close the gaps and disallow, the Cardinals and Kyler Murray actually being able to escape outside of that pocket, because some quarterbacks can just get it done. We've seen it in Aaron Rodgers, who's 40 years old, get out of the pocket and throw the ball. I'm not comparing Kyler Murray to Aaron Rodgers, but in regards to flexibility, mobility, escapability, it has touchdown ability associated with those types of actions. So it would not surprise me that the Cardinals will go up 2 touchdowns. Now, if they win it, it is what it is. Do I expect them to win? No. Do I expect the Lions to make this a battle amongst battles? Well, they should, because it's an NFC game and it's an in-conference game. So if they can't get this win, then I don't know. Dan Campbell's going to have to move again after people found his address the first time around.
That's funny. I think I have this graph here on the, So check this out. Betting on any team priced between the threes facing a foe that covered a spread by 27 or more points in their previous game, being the Cardinals. Foe was not a playoff team in the previous season, which obviously the Cardinals were not. That's pretty good for Detroit there. And then I went through the the predictive model here a little bit, and the Lions are 55-37 straight up and 73-18 against the spread for 80% in road games and committing fewer turnovers than the opponent. And the model is telling me that the Cardinals are potentially, no guarantee, but about a 70% chance that they're going to commit more turnovers than the Lions. So if you're live in-game betting, stay on top of this turnover battle because the ball can bounce funny. It's not round. And it does do weird things, as Bo will attest to. So if the Cardinals commit the first turnover, that might be an opportunity then to get Detroit. If Detroit does, you would probably want to save your pizza money so you can eat dinner later on in the day. But seriously, that is an opportunity there to watch the game and be looking for certain things to happen and then make a decision whether to bet or not. So that's that. Now, best bets around the table. I'm going to start first. And for the show, I'm gonna pull the trigger here. And I hope I'm not sorry that I do, but I can't get off the circa data with the Eagles moving 7 points since the preseason line. I try to teach my clients discipline. If the numbers are telling us to do it and the fundamentals are aligned, then you do it. We're not betting on teams. We're not betting on mascots. We're not betting on what Philadelphia media thinks of their team or the fan base. We're betting on the situations. And I do think that we're buying the Eagles very, very cheaply here, especially if they really are a Super Bowl contending type team, which I still think they are capable of doing. But the offense is going to have to score 35 or more points a game for them to really win games, because that defense is going to give up a lot of points. So for the show, I'm going to take the Eagles plus the 3. I think it goes to 3.5 because the public is going to bet the daylights between now and Sunday on the Saints, and I wouldn't be surprised if it moved to 4. So I think you want to be a little patient. Another strategy I would do is I would bet, if you're a $100 bettor, bet 50 pre-flop on the Eagles. Okay? See, and then get a feel for the game when it starts. If the Saints come out and go right down the field and score, that's not the end of the game. In fact, then you can add maybe, 2 more units to the Eagles. And then if the Saints, say the Eagles score first and the Saints come back and retake the lead during the first half, there's another opportunity to get on the Eagles. You're trying to buy live in-game as cheaply as possible, just like you're, day trading a stock or a commodity. That's exactly what the analogy is. So keep that in mind too. Bo, what is your best bet for the show?
Yeah, so I would take the Dolphins to cover. I'm going to have Seattle win outright, but they have a history of struggling against backup quarterbacks. And since they have a line at 4.5, I'm guessing that the Seahawks win by a field goal here and the Dolphins cover. So I would look for that. They signed Huntley. We watched Huntley, back up in with Baltimore and play well. So he has a ton of weapons there. Obviously, the Dolphins don't really play defense, so that works out for Seattle. But they do have a tendency to play down to competition when there's a backup quarterback. So I would watch for Seattle to win outright, but I would take the Dolphins to cover.
Quite a bit, and a little system supporting the Dolphins. Bet on road underdogs 3.5 to 9.5 points, coming off a home loss of double digits or more in the first 4 weeks of the regular season. That has gone 84% for 27-4 record against the numbers. So I like that one quite a bit, Bo. Rudy, what do you have for us for a best bet?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to jump on this Seattle deal. I think that Seattle does cover, but I think the Dolphins end up getting the win. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. Why? Because they're 4.5 point underdogs. I mean, how do you not call for that? They're on the road. They have a chance to play in front of a pretty good crowd and a CBS game. I just think that Skylar Thompson's going to probably put it together a little bit more so than we've seen after the injury to Tua Tagovailoa. I'm not going to say that it's going to be an outright, win or a shellacking like we've seen against Dallas and the Saints. But when it's all said and done, I really think that I think Miami can get it done on the road as long as it's not winter time or Christmas time. I think they have a shot. Oh wait, Tua's not playing. My bad.
It is going to rain. It is going
to rain. Okay, well, Skylar Thompson plays better in the rain. He did in college. Tua's no good in any weather other than hot and muggy weather. So I think that I think Miami has a shot. So I'm going to stick with Miami to win this and a 3-point field goal win.
Very good. Excellent show, guys. I really appreciate the time that you committed to this and will be for the next several weeks. We will have Jim Coventry from RotoWire on next week, I believe. And we have a pretty outstanding list of guests that we're going to just make as the fourth one to complete our foursome so that when we go to the golf course, we don't have to pay for 4 rounds when there's only 3 players playing. That was supposed to be funny, but it ended up not being. But do yourself all a favor and catch Rudy Reyes at Fox 26 KMPH. He's a great broadcaster, very intelligent, knowledgeable. It'll be worth your time. And Bo, the founder and co-host of Coast to Coast Sports on Roku TV. If you need links for those shows, I have them, and I can provide them to you very quickly.
That show starts
6 minutes from now. There you go. So let's all go watch that now and support it.
Great show, Bo.
You know what? Take it easy, gentlemen.
Well,
Thanks,
we
guys.
always sign off like this with, and I mean this seriously, bet with your head, never over it, and may all the wins be yours.